Good evening. I'm Robert Hadlock, news anchor at KXAN TV in Austin. About this time every 2 years, in this building behind me, the governor of Texas shares his vision for the future of the state and sets his priorities for the current legislative session. The State of the State speech is typically delivered in the Texas House chambers in front of the entire legislative body. However, in the middle of a pandemic, this year, that was not possible. But the message still needs to be delivered. Tonight, for the first time in Texas history, the governor will deliver the address outside the Capitol and on primetime television. The speech will be seen and streamed live in 14 Nexstar television markets and is being made available to all other Texas broadcasters. The governor is delivering his address tonight about 30 miles southeast of Austin in Lockhart, Texas, at the VFT Technology Plant. Over the weekend, the governor toured the facility with CEO John Kinzer. After the speech, the Texas Democratic Party will be sharing their response, so stick around for that. And now, here is Texas Governor Greg Abbott with tonight's State of the State address.
Good evening to members of the Texas Legislature who join us tonight virtually, and to my fellow Texans. As we gather tonight, I can tell you the state of our state is brimming with promise. That promise is seen in places like where I am tonight, Lockhart, Texas, home of great barbecue and the location of Visionary Fiber Technologies. The folks at Visionary Fiber, they use cutting-edge technology to provide innovative products that are transforming our future. They exemplify the tenacity of Texans, going to work to earn a living, going to work to make a difference, persevering during challenges, prospering because of the entrepreneurial spirit that is so unique to Texas. Now, looking back, it's clear. 2020 was a year unlike any in our lifetime, not just for Texas and America, but for the entire world. I've seen firsthand the personal hardships and the pain that we have all endured. Our hearts are with those who have suffered from COVID, and we mourn for every single Texan who lost their lives to the virus. We pray to God that their families will heal from the hurt of losing a loved one. And we also pray for all of the Texans who are still recovering from COVID. And we are grateful that this week, more than 2 million Texans have recovered from COVID. Now, to say the pandemic is a challenge is an understatement. But to say that it has been a reversal of who we are as Texans is a misstatement. Texas remains the economic engine of America, the land of unmatched opportunity, and our comeback is already materializing. Texas has added new jobs for 8 months in a row. In December alone, Texas added more than 64,000 new jobs. Texans are returning to work. Students are returning to school. Families are reestablishing routines. With each passing day of more vaccinations and increased immunity, normalcy is returning to Texas. But it has not been easy. In times of adversity, there will always be heroes who rise above the challenges we face. Our communities are filled with those heroes. Heroes who summon the strength and the perseverance to fight. Fight not just for themselves or their families, but for their neighbors, their communities, and even complete strangers. Think of our nurses and doctors, the food servers, the hospital janitors. Think of the truck drivers, grocery clerks, small business owners, and so many Texans who labor on the front lines. Think of our farmers and the ranchers who provide the food that is so desperately needed. Think of Texans like Eliana Gill. Eliana is a nurse at Ascension Seton Medical Center in Austin. She volunteered to go be on the front line in the hospital's COVID unit. Eliana is like so many healthcare workers across the state who did not hesitate to answer the call. There are Texans like Amruth Nandish and Southwick Solati, two high school students who launched Telementors. Telementors is a virtual mentorship and tutoring program for children of those frontline workers. And there is Navy veteran Rhodesia Scott. Now get this. Rhodesia opened a brick and mortar beauty supply store in the middle of the pandemic. It's named Lynn's Beauty Depot in DeSoto. She became a lifeline to other entrepreneurs when she launched Small Business Saturdays, allowing other businesses to use her store to sell their products. These Texans typify what we have witnessed across our state, from East Texas to El Paso, from the Panhandle to Brownsville. Texans have shown grit, resilience, and compassion throughout the entire pandemic. These are hard-working Texans. Hard-working Texans are at the forefront of our agenda this legislative session as we build a healthier, safer, freer, and more prosperous state. Now, we've already seen what Texas can achieve when we create an environment that promotes freedom and empowers the people to succeed. Get this. Texas has been ranked the #1 state for business for 16 straight years. For the past 8 years, we led the nation in economic development. And we have led America in exports for 18 straight years. The Texas model, it inspires entrepreneurs and innovators and attracts job creators from across the entire country. Think about this. In the past year, Fortune 500 companies like Hewlett-Packard Enterprise moved their headquarters to Spring, Texas, which is just outside of Houston. Oracle moved its headquarters to Austin, Texas, where it already had a campus. And Charles Schwab moved its headquarters to Westlake, Texas, which is between Dallas and Fort Worth. We are proud that these businesses now call Texas home. And transformational leaders like Tesla picked Texas for their next generation of innovation. But it's not just large cities that benefit. For example, in Amarillo, they are seeing the most economic development activity in the last 30 years. The same can be said for communities across the state. Most importantly, though, the cornerstone of our economic success is the small businesses in every community across Texas. 9 out of 10 businesses in Texas are small, and they employ nearly half of all working Texans. Because of their prowess, this time last year, Texas was #1 in America for the most new jobs. With their effort this year, Texas will once again lead the nation in job creation. success like this has been fostered by the Texas legislature and by leaders like my dear friends, Lieutenant Governor Patrick and Speaker Phelan. Now, other states like California and New York, they use heavy-handed government tactics that drive away businesses. The Texas legislature, on the other hand, has built a framework that helps small businesses thrive. But as Senator Taylor and Representative Huberty know, to stay on top, to sustain this growth, we must continue to invest in our future. And that is exactly what we did last session when we passed sweeping reforms to our school finance system and made major investments in our students and our teachers. And we are already seeing the results of that work, with teachers across Texas earning meaningful pay raises. I'm proud to say that last year, teachers who had worked up to 5 years received an average raise of $3,800. Teachers with more than 5 years' experience saw their pay increase by an average of $5,200. And we are also closing the digital divide for Texas students. The state partnered with school districts to provide internet connectivity and e-learning devices for schools and for students. Investments like these are a victory for teachers, for students, and for parents as we provide our children with a quality education regardless of their zip code. This session, we must continue to fund education as we promised. Also, if we expect the next generation of Texans to keep Texas the best state in the nation, we must teach them why we are so exceptional. We must educate them what it means to be an American and what it means to be a Texan. So we must bolster civics education in our classrooms and ensure that every child learns the values of freedom, good governance, and patriotism. This session must also be used to ensure a healthier Texas. The most pressing health priority is to help Texans recover from the pandemic. As we continue to combat the pandemic, we do so with better tools, more knowledge, plus medical improvements that are helping us move beyond this challenge. And for that, I want to thank Chief Nim Kidd and Dr. John Hellerstedt. With their guidance, we set up medical centers where Texans can get the new antibody therapeutic medicine. This medicine is incredible. It helps people who get COVID heal quicker, and it keeps them out of hospitals. To defeat this pandemic, we are accelerating the vaccine process. Texas was the first state to vaccinate more than 1 million residents. And just 2 weeks later, we exceeded 2 million vaccinations. That number will increase even faster in the coming weeks as additional vaccines are approved. We will continue expanding vaccinations across Texas until every Texan who wants one will be able to get one. But if we are going to fully address COVID-related health issues, we must also focus on the mental health challenges that Texans are facing. During the pandemic, we created a 24/7 mental health support line. We provided crisis counseling, and we established virtual access for behavioral services. They were funded by the almost $8 billion that the legislature devoted to mental health last session. I will work with the legislature this session to ensure that Texas continues to address these challenges. One healthcare tool that proved very helpful during the pandemic was the use of telemedicine. It's convenient. It's convenient for both the patient and the doctor. We should seize the opportunity this session to permanently expand telemedicine so that every Texan in every region of the state can benefit from it. From medicine to education to business, broadband access is not a luxury. It is an essential tool that must be available for all Texans. That is why I am making the expansion of broadband access an emergency item this session. Now, looking beyond just COVID, there is more that we can do this session to ensure that all Texans have better access to health care. That includes ensuring that Texans with pre-existing conditions have access to health care coverage without being forced into the Affordable Care Act. A healthier Texas, it goes hand in hand with a safer Texas. Texas has always been a law and order state, and we are going to stay that way. We're not going to let cities in Texas follow the lead of cities like Portland and Seattle and Minneapolis by defunding the police. That's crazy. We will support our law enforcement officers, not demonize and defund them. Defunding law enforcement invites crime and chaos into communities. It risks the lives and livelihoods of innocent people. To keep Texans safe and to discourage cities from going down this dangerous path, we must pass laws that prevent cities from defunding police. This issue is so urgent, I am making it an emergency item this session. Public safety is also at risk because of a broken bail system. A broken bail system that recklessly allows dangerous criminals back out onto our streets. Too many Texans like Damon Allen have been murdered because of our broken bail system. Damon Allen was a state trooper who was gunned down during a traffic stop. His killer was out on a $15,000 bond despite having previously been convicted of assaulting a sheriff's deputy and having been arrested on charges of evading arrest and aggravated assault on a public servant. He shot and killed Trooper Damon Allen in the line of duty. Damon Allen's wife, Casey, was robbed of her husband. Their children robbed of their father. To fix our flawed bail system and to keep dangerous criminals off our streets, I am making the Damon Allen Act an emergency item this session. At the same time, we cannot ignore the need to improve policing. It helps our law enforcement officers do a better job. It makes our communities safer. This session, we must provide law enforcement with the tools and the training they need to ensure the safety that their communities deserve. Public safety also extends to our border. Because of the federal government's open border policies, Texas must work to fortify our efforts to secure our border. We already have planes in the air, boots on the ground, boats on the water, and cruisers on the roads. We must expand our efforts to crack down on human trafficking and to put an end to drug smuggling in Texas. We also have a duty this session to keep Texas the freedom capital of America. Whether you're a newcomer to our state or your family has been here for generations, we all unite around the ideals of freedom and personal liberty. But freedom is fragile. If left undefended, we risk losing our freedoms one by one. Freedom of religion is enshrined in the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. And yet, some government officials across the country shut down churches during the pandemic. Even in Texas, some local officials tried closing churches. That is wrong. We must ensure that freedom to worship is forever safeguarded. I want a law this session that prevents any government entity from shutting down religious activities in Texas. But let's face it, it's not just First Amendment freedoms that have been threatened. Second Amendment rights are also under attack. Politicians from the federal level to the local level have shouted, "Heck yes, the government is coming to get your guns." We won't let that happen in Texas. Last session, I signed 10 laws to protect gun rights in Texas. This session, we need to erect a complete barrier against any government official anywhere from treading on gun rights in Texas. Texas must be a Second Amendment sanctuary state. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those are guaranteed rights on which our founders established our country. The sentence in the Declaration of Independence that lists those three rights is followed by this, and I quote, "To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed." Now, precisely what the governed consent to should never be in doubt. That is why the integrity of elections is so essential to our democracy. One thing that all of us should agree on, whether you are a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent, is that we must have trust and confidence in the outcome of our elections. That is why election integrity will be an emergency item this session. The most precious freedom of all is life itself. Our Creator endowed us with the right to life. And yet, millions of children lose their lives every year before they are even born. Estimates show that more than 40 million babies lost their lives to abortion in 2020. That's shocking. It's horrifying. It must end. I have signed 11 laws that protect innocent lives, but more must be done. This session, we need a law that ensures that the life of every child will be spared from the ravages of abortion. And we should make explicit what should be obvious. No unborn child should be targeted for abortion on the basis of race, sex, or disability. Next, another important issue is helping the millions of businesses and workers who have been impacted by the pandemic. To say the very least, we must balance the state budget without increasing taxes. I want to thank Senators Nelson and Hinojosa, as well as Representatives Capric-Leon and Longoria, for their financial stewardship this past year to put Texas in a position to be able to achieve those goals. But listen, there's far more to do to help business owners and their employees. They have gone above and beyond throughout the pandemic to open and to operate safely. And yet, those same businesses now face the crosshairs of lawsuits. Texas businesses that have operated in good faith shouldn't have their livelihoods destroyed by frivolous lawsuits. I'm asking the legislature to quickly get a bill to my desk that provides civil liability protections for individuals, businesses, and healthcare providers that operated safely during the pandemic. This is an emergency item this session. We must also ensure that in the event another pandemic ever strikes again, families and businesses will never again face the financial consequences they experienced in 2020. I will continue working with the legislature to find ways to navigate a pandemic while also allowing businesses to remain open. We must find solutions that allow all Texans to enjoy the unique prosperity that comes with being a Texan. Now, the pandemic has revealed what makes Texas great, as well as ways that we can make it even better. Texas prides itself on low regulations, but our response to the crisis revealed even more regulations that can be cut. For example, we suspended a number of regulations to help Texans navigate challenging times. That included measures like helping our restaurants by allowing them to sell alcohol to go, and allowing Texans easier access to doctors through the use of telemedicine. Some of those ideas are worth keeping. That's why I'm asking the legislature to make permanent some of the regulatory relief that are authorized. This will cut red tape and unleash the full might of the Texas economy. And speaking of the Texas economy, it has now grown so big, if Texas was its own country, we would now have the 9th largest economy in the entire world. There is no brand more powerful than Made in Texas. I want the hard-working Texans who built that brand to know you have a governor who has your back. Products that are made with the Texas brand should be made by Texans. We must protect Texas jobs for Texas families. Employers should be hiring Texans when they fill job openings. If job training skills are needed, the state will work to provide them. We've already supported job training programs that have achieved remarkable success. I met Stacia Brightman from the Houston area. Just a few years ago, she was homeless. That changed after she went through the job training program at S&B Engineers and Constructors, and she began to work her way up the ranks. In just a few years, she went from being homeless to becoming a home owner. And when she told me how much she is making, I let her know she's now earning more than the governor of Texas. Opportunity. Opportunity is what Texas is all about. Now, there's no doubt that we faced some hard times this past year, but as Texans, we never shy away from challenges. Instead, we embrace them. We adapt and overcome and grow stronger as a result. This session, the legislature can continue that legacy. We can help Texans across our state exit this chapter even stronger. We can help them achieve the boundless opportunities that exist only in Texas. And just as Texans have united and put their differences aside to support one another through the pandemic, we in the Capitol must also come together to work on their behalf. We must seize this opportunity to make our state healthier, safer, freer, and more prosperous for all who call Texas home. The First Lady, Cecilia Abbott, she joins me in saying thank you to our fellow Texans who work every single day to make our state the greatest in America. We pray that God blesses you and guides you, and we pray that God forever blesses the great state of Texas.
Thank you, Governor. Texas Democrats have their own vision for the future, and they're sharing them through the experiences of friends and neighbors. Here now is the Democratic response to the Republican State of the State address.
I went down in the river to pray, studying about that good old way, and who shall wear the starry crown? Good Lord, show me the way.
My name is Gilberto Hinojosa, chair of the Texas Democratic Party. Let's be clear. No matter what Governor Abbott says, we have suffered under his watch because of his actions. We are all hurting. Texans are demanding an end to this pandemic and a fair shot to get ahead. As Barbara Jordan said, what the people want is very simple. They want an America as good as its promise. Tonight, Texas Democrats invite you to hear from your fellow Texans.
My brother Joaquin and I grew up just a few blocks away from here, raised by our mother and our grandmother in this working class neighborhood. They taught us that in order for a community to thrive, there had to be people willing to show up and fight for it. As Texans and as Americans, we believe that everyone should have a fair shot at opportunity. Unfortunately, opportunity is out of reach for too many Texans today, and the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed just how many families are struggling to make ends meet. 35,000 Texas families have lost loved ones to this virus. The unemployment rate has more than doubled in the last year alone. And our state's leadership under Governor Abbott has failed to adequately respond, leaving Texas with one of the worst outbreaks and one of the worst responses in the entire nation.
The coronavirus has claimed too many lives, including my mother and my brother.
I wake up every day and I go to work where I'm face to face with a devastating impact.
We saw our coworkers drop off for 2 weeks and sometimes more. I'm a former meatpacking employee and now a union representative for 2 meatpacking plants.
I'm a respiratory therapist at Corpus Christi Medical Center for 40 years.
I'm Oscar Leisure, the mayor of El Paso. And while I know personally what it's like to have the family torn apart by this pandemic, I also know there's so many more Texans out there who are suffering.
We were working shoulder to shoulder, unable to social distance, taking precautions on our own.
Many of my fellow healthcare workers put their lives on the line to protect our communities.
The state and federal government need to take measurable steps towards securing the health and safety of all Texans. We need to work together with one goal, one voice to tackle the pandemic. I am committed to working with them and working towards a brighter future. Let's keep all Texans safe.
Oh, brothers, let's go down, come on down. Come on, brothers, let's go down in the river to pray.
COVID-19 has hit Black and brown communities harder than anyone else in Texas.
Immigrants are performing essential work, risking their lives without having any access to health care. My name is Juana Guzman, and I am a community organizer with Raíces.
My name is Dr. Candace Matthews. I am the statewide Harris County Chapter Accountability Chair for the Texas Coalition of Black Democrats and an activist in the movement for Black Lives. Our communities are under attack from all sides.
COVID-19 has hit many communities very hard. In particular, people in detention are living an absolute brutal reality.
We are facing the constant threat of police brutality and grieving Patrick Warren, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and Javier Amler, and too many other Black Americans whose lives have been stolen.
Instead of wasting money on lawsuits, and building a wall, politicians need to do better for all people in Texas.
Our communities should not have to live with trauma and fear of wondering if they or their families or their neighbors will be next to die from police brutality.
We demand that every single racist policy be uprooted, starting with SB 4. The mission at Raíces is simple, but it is also incredibly hard work. We defend the rights of immigrants and refugees, we empower individuals, families, and communities, and we advocate for human rights. We are asking legislators to strive to do the same.
Black lives matter, Black jobs matter, Black livelihoods matter, and Black communities matter. Keep rising for racial justice, because we would not know justice until it's reality for Black communities everywhere.
The COVID-19 pandemic uncovered the ugly truth of the inequities in our healthcare system. I'm State Representative Symphonia Thompson of House District 141 from Houston. The fallout of this pandemic is only going to exacerbate the cost of healthcare even more. But I am hopeful that we will use our good senses and work together to provide 12 months postpartum care for women and draw down federal Medicaid dollars. For a long time, we have been leaving billions of Texas dollars on the table that belong to us, and it's time to bring that money home. Until women, particularly women of color, have access to health care and equal opportunities, I am going to be at your state capitol fighting to push women forward. I, along with my Texas Democrats, will continue to fight for you and your families in the legislature. I'll work with everyone to get things done and get things done right for you, because that's the Democratic way.
2 million Texans have contracted COVID-19. Businesses have closed. I'm State Senator Carol Alvarado from Houston, and I'm honored to talk about the state of our state. I wish I could tell you that the state of our state is strong and working for all Texans, but the sad truth is it's not. 7 million Texans have filed unemployment claims.
And we need a state government that will fight for us. My name is Jared Strange. I'm a proud union iron worker representative for the state of Texas in the construction industry. We build Texas. Working Texans want a fair shot to get ahead, but the Republicans in charge at the Capitol aren't getting the job done. We're sick of politicians who care more about political donors than about our paychecks, and who we work to cut taxes for big business, even when those companies ship jobs overseas. We need higher wages, more access to job training and apprenticeships, good public schools for our kids, and we need better access to the COVID vaccine.
Families are struggling and haven't been able to get their kids back to school.
I know firsthand how Greg Abbott's failed leadership has truly impacted students like myself and those that are in education all across the state of Texas. My name is Ali Shirazi, and I'm a student at the University of Texas studying government. Greg Abbott's delayed response and mixed signaling left students, educators, teachers, and administration in the dark. I'm asking our Texas legislators to pass COVID-19 relief and guidelines to help our educators, our students, our school administration all across the state of Texas.
Texans are tough and resilient, but in order to get through these difficult times, we must get our priorities straight. That's why Texas Democrats have been pushing for years to expand Medicaid, because we're not okay with the fact that we are the nation's most uninsured state. We're not okay with the fact that only 1% of Texans are fully vaccinated for COVID. We're not okay with asking our teachers to go back into the schools without giving them the resources for safe classrooms.
This past year has been one of the most difficult ever. My name is Chris Turner, and I'm a state representative for District 101 in Tarrant County. Our communities have been ravaged by the COVID-19 pandemic. We're also facing a challenging economic reality. The state has to step up and help people get back to work. This legislative session, Texas House Democrats will fight to expand health care access for millions of uninsured Texans. We'll fight for continuous coverage for children and new mothers so they aren't kicked off their health care, especially now when they need it the most. We'll fight for health equity, tackling the tragic and unacceptable racial disparities in our healthcare systems that this pandemic has exposed. And we'll help Texas workers and businesses get back on their feet. Texas House Democrats are committed to work for all Texans and provide real solutions for the challenges we face.
This session, let's roll up our sleeves, mask up, and pass common sense solutions to the critical needs of Texans.
They deserve leaders who are focused on keeping them and their families healthy and safe, not political games out of Washington. We have to hold our leaders accountable. We have to believe in science and listen to experts. And we have to get this virus under control so we can get our small businesses back open, get Texans back to work, and get our children back in the classroom. If we get this right, we can build a stronger Texas that works for everyone. If we don't, we'll continue to get left behind. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone who participated in the Democratic response. And we also would like to thank our underwriters tonight who made this presentation possible. Texas Oil and Gas Insurance Association, Texas Association of Manufacturers, Motorola Solutions, Association of Electric Companies of Texas, Texas Retailers Association, Charter Communications, Spectrum, Associated General Contractors of Texas, and AT&T. So what does it all mean? What kind of verbal sparring will we hear in the months to come in the building behind me? To better understand what we heard tonight, we put together a group of lawmakers and journalists to break it all down. Let's go live to Sally Hernandez.
All great questions, Robert. Thank you for that. Good evening. I'm Sally Hernandez, the news anchor on KXAN TV here in Austin. And yes, we are back in the town of Lockhart, where Governor Abbott chose to highlight this business, Texas Visionary Fiber Technologies. And we have a panel of experts and lawmakers here. You'll recognize, of course, we have State Senator Royce West, a Democrat representing Senate District 23, which includes Dallas. He's been with the Texas Senate for nearly 30 years. And we'll go along and introduce everybody as we move along through the night here to talk about a lot to unpack here. Senator West, let's go ahead and start with you. What did you think about the governor's address? What did you like about it?
Well, he gave a clear vision of where Texas is right now and as it relates to our success in terms of our economy, in terms of where we would rank if we were rated as a country. But when we begin to look at the issues, there was a lot of support for police, for law enforcement, but there was no issue, there was no mention of accountability in terms of Black Lives Matter, issues concerning accountability for police officers. We talk about being number one, but they're in this country in terms of economy and in this world, but there was no real mention of that we're number one in terms of the number of uninsured. And there's a lot of work that we need to do as it relates to the uninsured here in the country.
Representative Jeannie Morrison, just a background here for our viewers. This is your 11th term in the legislature. Republican representing House District 30, which does include Victoria and a stretch of our Gulf Coast. Going off of what Senator West is saying, how would you describe the Democrats' response to the governor's message and how passionate they were on some of those issues about racial justice and injustice?
Well, I think the Democrats are very passionate. We're all passionate, and we all want to work together during this legislative session to make sure that we address any issues. We're going to be working together, and I think that's the theme that the governor gave to us tonight. We will be working together to come to consensus and make sure that we address all the issues that we all are concerned about.
Let's talk about the first thing the governor talked about in his speech there, COVID pandemic, which is why, of course, we are here tonight. You also have seen the lawmakers behind us over Zoom on the large panels. This is a first that we're seeing a governor address the state outside of the Capitol, Josh. And he painted a picture of the COVID-19 response as Texas is doing great. Democrats didn't see it that way in that message. And by the way, Josh Hinkle, I introduce you as Josh all the time just because you're my friend, but Josh Hinkle over here is our host of State of Texas, the politics program, and you've been covering politics for the past decade or more. Any surprises in this speech?
Well, he talked a lot about the emergency items he wanted to tackle and have the legislature tackle. It seems right now, at least our viewers with KXAN, and I know Texans across the state, are very concerned when you talk about the coronavirus, specifically with the vaccination rollout. In the Austin area, there have been a lot of problems with the system and in other communities across Texas. And I think that immediately, emergency, that's what comes to mind for me.
It wasn't an emergency item, though. Representative Morrison, was that a mistake?
Well, I think we all see COVID as an emergency item. We have never been through a pandemic before, and so I think the governor has done a very good job of rolling out what he had to work with. We only get our COVID vaccines from the federal government, and so we can only dispense what we receive. But on the per capita, that's how we receive it. But I know there have been some hiccups, but this is something we've never done before, and I think the governor has done a good job of working with all of us and helping us do it in our areas. I mean, tell him what we need and how we can address it. And so I think we're doing a good job, and the last couple of weeks we've done a great job of getting the vaccines out.
Senator West, I want to touch on that with you in a bit, but first I want to introduce Jim Henson here. He's the director of the Texas Politics Project at the University of Texas, and why his perspective is so appreciated tonight is because you conduct statewide polling. So what do Texans have to say about the COVID-19 crisis? Is it an emergency that is still very top of mind?
Well, you know, where people stand on the pandemic is very shaped by how they frame it and their partisan position. As the pandemic was really peaking in the fall in the University of Texas Tribune poll, we asked people how concerned they were about spread in their community. Among Democrats, 69% were either extremely or very concerned. Among Republicans, only 19% were very or extremely concerned. So there's a real difference in how people are experiencing the pandemic and then how they view the policy response.
Senator West, are your constituents telling you that they're able to get a COVID-19 shot easily?
No, I mean, they're not able to, but let's put it in perspective. The reality is we haven't been here before in our lifetime in terms of a pandemic. So I'm not going to sit up and say the governor's doing a bad job. You know, the reality is that he has Hellerstedt, who's the Commissioner of Health, and also NIMKID, the Texas Management Office, in place. And if for some reason they were not being responsive to members of the legislature, whether they're Democrats or Republican, then I'd be the first one to stand up and say, Governor, you're not doing your job. But let's not turn around and sit up and say a person's not doing their job when initially no one's ever been in a situation before. Let's make certain we continue to work with him. And if they're not responsive, then make certain that people in the state of Texas know they're not responsive.
We have some agreement on the response to the COVID-19 pandemic from Senator Royce and Representative Morrison here. Disagreement, though, when it comes to something else, and it has to do with the nation that is torn, the issue of race and policing. Let's start off with you, Josh. Let's talk about why the governor did not talk so much about race. He was very passionate tonight about the need for public safety from a law enforcement perspective. And he doesn't want to he wants to have a law that makes sure that cities do not defund police. So he's very passionate about that. But he didn't mention policing and race together.
Yeah, I think that was one of the biggest differences you saw between his speech and the Democratic response. The Democrats obviously, talked a lot about race and how it has been a part of the conversation, not just with justice, but with the coronavirus, with education, with so many other facets of what our government is having to deal with right now. I think the biggest thing that I thought about when he was talking about policing was his early support at possibly, the legislature looking at the George Floyd Act. And I know, Senator, you can talk about that.
Well, in fact, I mentioned it to him tonight, and he was open to supporting legislation dealing with police accountability. I was dismayed that he didn't mention that in his speech, because that's an emergency, not only in Texas, but in this country. And the reality is that when you begin to look at the hobby school poll, it showed that like 72% of Texans want to see the George Floyd Act passed. And so from that vantage point, I'm hoping that the governor will, just like the the passion that he had behind supporting police, that he also makes certain he has the same passion concerning accountability for law enforcement.
Representative Morrison, what are your constituents telling you about policing and racial
Well,
injustices?
as any government's first responsibility is to keep their citizens safe. And so I definitely support law enforcement. But I also want to work with my colleagues and Senator West to make sure that there is accountability. That is something that there definitely needs to be. And so we have to make sure that we work together. And I think that will happen because we will be working together to find accountability, but also to be very supportive of our law enforcement officers also.
The governor also talking about jobs and the economy, saying that Texas is doing great, leading the nation. He says when it comes to economic development, he says Texas is adding jobs. Julian Castro saying that actually that's not the case. Representative Morrison, is the governor doing enough that he needs to do when it comes to getting Texans back to work?
Well, I think one of the things the governor did was making sure that businesses could reopen. If you look at the states that are staying shut during COVID, if you look at New York and California, it has not helped them. I mean, their numbers are just getting more and more people that have COVID as they're staying inside. I think the governor has worked really hard to make sure that we're safe, but also that we have our economy and that people have their jobs and get back to work.
But bottom line, there aren't enough jobs right now. The #1 viewer complaint that we have coming into our newsroom is from people that are not able to access their unemployment benefits. There is a critical problem with the Texas Workforce Commission right now and the way that the system has not been able to serve Texans the way it's supposed to. Every single day we get dozens of emails from people saying, I cannot get my benefits. I have been on the phone for hours. I have not been able to feed my family. And this is something that I feel like was not part of his speech that perhaps a lot of people were hoping he would focus on.
Well, Jim, you would have perspective. Please go ahead, Senator West.
And that's exactly right. When you hear about, you ask about district, we get a lot of complaints about the TWC system and about being able to file for workers, their wages through the agency, not being able to do it, or being able to appeal decisions that are being made, or instances where their identity is being stolen. And checks are going to persons like that. 7 million people in the state of Texas, unemployed, that file unemployment claims. We've got to make certain we do better in terms of the system. We're going to have to work together in order to get that done. I would hope that it's not just a Republican solution, but it needs to be a Republican and a Democrat solution. We need to be doing more things on a bipartisan basis in terms of authors of these bills. Even though Republicans control the legislature, if we're going to get things done, let's work together in order to get them done.
Jim, I'm just curious on what Texans think when it comes to jobs. Is that #1 on their mind?
Well, it depends how you ask, but one thing we do know is that we used to see prior to the pandemic, prior to the recent economic dislocations because of the pandemic, that when you asked people about their assessments of their economic situation, it was really fundamentally shaped by partisanship, who was in charge of policy. The objective conditions have gotten serious enough, the kinds of problems everyone is talking about, that we've seen that kind of drop out. Republicans and Democrats are now both saying, I'm doing worse off than I was a year ago. I think the state is worse off than it was a year ago. So however people are trying to interpret it, the fundamental experiences that people are having are much harder than they've been in Texas for a long time.
Right. And can I jump in real quickly? And I agree with Senator West. We get a lot of phone calls helping people with the Workforce Commission, but there again, they were inundated in a system that they didn't have any way to keep up with because they have never been through a pandemic either. But that is one thing. Jobs are very important, and we've got to make sure, Senator West too, that we do work together. And we will work together, and I'm looking forward to working with you because people do need to get their jobs back. That's why we've got to get the economy open. That's why we have to keep the economy open so people can get their jobs back and can go on with their lives.
Josh, and we'll give you a monthly report on us working together.
There you go.
No, let's not wait for a month. Let's talk about it now. What will you commit tonight to make sure that you work with the Republicans when it comes to not only the economy, affordable health insurance, and then I got to talk about education too.
Oh, that's my favorite
You know, the
subject.
governor talked about how we still need to continue to fund education. What are you going to commit to tonight, Senator West?
Well, I commit to make certain that the gains that we made last session, HB3, that as a member of the Finance Committee, that we fund that. We make certain the monies that are there. In terms of the governor's talking about connectivity, I'll work with him on connectivity to make certain for once and for all that we make certain that we deal with this digital divide that we continue to talk about and talk about and talk about. In terms of issues concerning the economy, I want to make certain that not only do we continue to make certain that this economy continues to grow, but I want to make certain that the least of thee is able to get insurance and job opportunities in the state. That's what I'll commit to do.
The governor talked about so much of what the progress with education, but I think what we're hearing from parents every day is they're worried about the setbacks that their kids have had when they've had to be at home for months after months,
Right.
and the progress that they're not making. The failure rate, I think that's a scary thing for a lot of parents and teachers and school districts out there. What do you think?
Absolutely. It is an issue, and I agree with Senator West. Broadband, and that being an emergency item, is huge for
It's
me
huge.
because representing a rural area, we just still have a lot of areas that don't have access. And supporting House Bill 3 and making sure that we fully fund it, I'm committed 100% to do that, and I know Senator West is also. So that's
There we
something
go.
that we definitely are going to work together to do.
I am running out of time. I know we have a lot to talk about. I got to get this question in, though. The governor talked a lot about some federal issues. This is usually a night where he talks about state issues. Let's go around the table here, and I want to ask you. Let's start with you, Senator West. Is the governor preparing to run for the White House?
Against Kamala Harris? I don't think so.
That's a no. Jim?
You know, I think the governor is preparing for the session, but he's preparing in the same way that he would prepare if he was going to run for president.
All right, got to go quickly.
By talking about
Josh?
national
Could be a
issues.
stump speech to me.
All right.
Well, he's not talked to me about it, but I think he's getting ready for this session, and as Jim said, whatever comes after that, we'll see.
We are out of time. Make sure that you watch Josh, of course, with State of Texas Sunday morning on your local Nexstar TV station. Robert, back to you at the Capitol. Thank you all.
Thank you, Sally. We again want to take a moment to thank our underwriters for tonight. Texas Oil and Gas Insurance Association, Texas Association of Manufacturers, Motorola Solutions, Association of Electric Companies of Texas, Texas Retailers Association, Charter Communications, Spectrum, Associated General Contractors of Texas, and AT&T. And we want to thank you for joining us for this important moment in Texas state politics. Hopefully you were able to learn more about what's going on during this current session, and you're able to add your voice of support or opposition to the debate. Good night.